I've been away for a little bit because I had a problem with my house. But anyhow, this ain't a home renovation channel. This is a tech channel. And the show must eventually go on. And that's what we're here today to do in my once again reconfigured office. Anyway, today, as soon as I can reach it with my bigness. Today, we're going to be taking a second look at a keyboard that a lot of people were kind of fucking annoyed with me for shitting on a while back after having used it for a year as my test keyboard over on my work desk, which is currently non-existent because I got to buy a fucking new one to fit in this little space. And that keyboard is the Drevo Calibur 71. I have some additional thoughts about this keyboard after things have evolved, after the company has responded with some interesting choices going forward with their products. And so let's take another look and let's talk about it. Okay, so for those of you unfamiliar, here's the keyboard in question. You can look at the link in the description to see my original review. Anyhow, let's address some of the individual points that were brought up in the comments section and in private messages in my last review. Okie dokie, let's address the first complaint that came out of most people's mouths, and that was me shitting all over the Bluetooth connectivity and criticizing those who would ever want a wireless mechanical keyboard for their gaming rig.
You mentioned that they should ditch Bluetooth, but isn't that the main reason for going with this keyboard? I should remove Bluetooth even if Bluetooth is the reason I and many other people bought it in first place? Bluetooth is one of the main features of this board. Without it, it's just like any other board. The Bluetooth is the key selling feature for me anyway. P is stored in the balls.
So as you can see, the majority of commenters were pretty respectful but generally unhappy with my assessment. So let me say this. I will admit that I underestimated the demand out there for wireless mechanical keyboards, but I will stand by my remarks and say that if you think this Drevo Calibur 71 is the solution, keep looking. After doing some research, it would seem that this keyboard's main problems are not only the polling rate, which will affect people who type very fast and need really responsive input, but also the general intermittency of the Bluetooth connection. What I can tell you from my experience is that distance wasn't a problem. I didn't have a hell of a lot of intermittency, although it did crop up once in a while. The main problem was indeed the input lag, and if you type fast and give it too much to do, you will notice a considerable slowdown in the sentence that you are typing. This can be particularly trying for anyone who's playing a game that requires quick, rapid responsiveness in real time of any kind. Now, as for the overall need for a mechanical keyboard that is wireless, I would question the motives of some. If you're a couch gamer who doesn't want a cable dangling at your legs between yourself and your PC, that's totally understandable. But if you're the kind of person who just doesn't like seeing the cable on the desk, believe me, we're just not there yet. We're not at the point where a wireless input connection is going to give you the same kind of satisfying experience that a wired connection will give you. And this isn't the kind of snootiness that exists for those people who refuse to use USB devices and still favor PS2 keyboards because of the whole lack of a polling rate. The fact that a PS2 device literally just interrupts the CPU and says, "Ah, bitch, do what I fucking say." That difference is small and almost undetectable for the average person. The difference between what you're getting here and a wired USB connection kind of can be like night and day, so be warned. The new software that came out for the Drevo Calibur 71 comes with all sorts of issues that I don't even know where to begin to describe. So let me just walk you through my journey that I've experienced in the last, 5 or 6 hours or so trying to play with it. It started with the news that I had discovered that there was a software suite available for the keyboard. So I naturally looked for it, and there it was on the website. The very crudely put together, haphazardly assembled website. But anyhow, there it was, so I downloaded it and I installed it. And then I plugged in my Drevo Calibur keyboard only to find that the software didn't recognize it. Google to the rescue, then eventually to Reddit, where one user said, actually, there's a firmware update that you need to apply to the keyboard in order to use the software with it. I installed the firmware seemed to stick, and then suddenly the software recognized the keyboard. Except for the fact that it recognized it as the Drevo Calibur 72 as opposed to the 71. Very slightly different key layout, I think, for Europeans or French people or some shit. In any event, it was modestly functional at that point, but I couldn't get the settings to stick. I would be able to change individual key colors or the whole fucking key color assignment or whatnot, but as soon as I would unplug it, it would reset to this default sort of like rainbowish color scheme, and I would have to go back into the software and reset it all again. So I figured maybe it was the fact that the firmware wasn't flashed properly that was causing the problem, so I did it again. And by the time I got all of that done, the lighting indicator on the software was completely grayed out, and I couldn't select it anymore. So the main reason that I would want this software in the first place was totally unusable to me. So I gave it a third go. I got the use of the lighting functionality back, but this weird thing kept happening. Every time I would apply a lighting scheme to the keyboard, the key that's in between the enter key and the backspace with the fucking one of the slashes on it, I can never remember which is back and front, and the two little doodaddy dots that are on top of each other that I never use, that key right there just kept cycling through colors, very, very slowly breathing, apart from everything else I had programmed. Bottom line is, nothing really worked. So after reading that very same Reddit post a little further, it became apparent to me that the firmware that was supposed to accompany the software on older revisions of the keyboard was actually taken down by the people at Drevo, which is why I didn't find it on their website and had to go searching elsewhere for it. And that's precisely why this particular Reddit user grabbed that firmware and saved it somewhere else, just in case people wanted to go through this process despite Drevo's wishes, which is clearly a concerning notion altogether in itself. I mean, usually when a company says, whoa, we're going to take that firmware off of our website and forget it ever existed, it's usually because it's going to fuck your shit up. And while I can safely say it didn't fuck my shit up, as I was able to at least get the keyboard back to the functionality it has out of the box with the key presses and the function key and all that, it still didn't quite work. So I don't even know how the software experience is with the Drevo Calibur with the newer revisions of keyboard that ship with this appropriate firmware. And therein lies a greater point that I've been trying to make in both this video and the last one, is that the Drevo Calibur 71 kind of seems like the hardware version of an early access game. Now, as we're with a video game, you can patch that shit, and you can start from scratch if you want, and then people's entire installations will be overwritten with the new version of that software, and they'll be good to go. But the same is not true for a piece of hardware. There's things inside that keyboard that's currently sitting to my left, which is why I keep pointing over here, that cannot be changed with firmware or software updates, and I think that might, at the very least, be part of the problem that they're experiencing with retroactively applying this firmware to these older keyboards. It comes back to the same issue I had with the keycaps, ABS versus PBT. If you're gonna change a product fundamentally to the point where it's different, it's actually different to the end user. We're not talking about swapping out capacitor brands or different resistors or different PCB makers or whatever the case may be. We're talking about real substantial end user changes. You gotta let people know. All you had to do, Drevo, was release a new version of the Calibur 71 and call it version 2. And then this whole problem that I'm now experiencing on behalf of the people watching this video would have been avoided. This video is already running kind of long, so let's just get some other stuff out of the way quickly. Number one, how are the keycaps holding up? Well, they are ABS, and I have used them for about 7 months now, and so far no keycap shines. Whatever that coating is they put on the top of them seems to be working. Number two, some users have claimed that the keys will just stop working after a couple of years. This is something that's universal to a lot of out-emu switches on a lot of keyboards. Apparently, I have not yet experienced that problem with this given keyboard, but then again, I don't use it as my daily driver, so take it for what you will. And finally, one thing I want to say about this keyboard that I don't think I stressed enough in the last video. It's not necessarily that this keyboard is bad. It actually is a pretty decent product for what it is. I think it might be a touch overpriced at 70 or so Canadian dollars. What's frustrating about it though is that it's so very close to being a fantastic product with just a few minor tweaks and revisions that could have occurred behind the scenes long before the product was released to the public. If they had just taken their time to work these things out in development rather than putting out a half-finished product to the public that has had numerous iterations over and over again and completely mismarketed in between iterations to mislead consumers who are buying the product thinking it's one thing when it's actually another, that's the problem. Anyhow, my apologies for the long absence. The new house stuff is basically what's happened there. We had some flooding. We have exterior waterproofed 2 vulnerable sides of the house. We're going to do the 3rd one probably later in the summer. And we installed a sump pit right here in my office that I had to cover with a giant box, which is why I don't have a fucking work desk right now. I'll be around. I'm not going anywhere. Don't worry. Do you think a guy wearing a shirt this green is going to just vanish on you like a leprechaun? Actually, maybe I probably... Anyhow, follow me on Twitter. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you again soon.